Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio, radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Tonight's topic is, well, it's us. My name is Allison Tiemann and I'm going to be your host, and joining me tonight is Hannah Wallen, Janet Bloomfield, Crystal Garcia, Karen Strawn, Rachel Edwards, and equity feminist and reporter Alex Brooke Lynn. Say hi, Alex.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so we're going to have a great conversation tonight. And to start off, we're going to talk a bit about Elliot Rodger and all of the stuff that's been going on in the media, in the mainstream media, and where it actually originated from. And I'm going to hand the mic over to Rachel. Rachel, are you ready to go?
Oh, yeah, baby. Okay, this is actually an article I placed on Tumblr yesterday. So if you want to look at the actual list, go to naughtynerdist.tumblr.com. Okay, but there we go. It's entitled, How Feminism Fucks the Media, or How Elliot Rodger Became an MRA. It's one thing to say that media bias exists, but how does one go about proving something like that? So I started by looking at the earliest articles about Elliot Rodger, trying to find where the link between him and the MRA might have been fabricated. Now, I expected some mistakes, and maybe sources from experts in gender studies, but it was worse than that. A good portion of the articles linking Elliot Rodger to MRAs goes back to a single article citing a blog. Not statistics citing a correlation between men's rights activism and violence against women. Not proof that MRAs are pickup artists or anti-pickup artists. Nope, it's a blog. Probably one of the most radically anti-MRA blogs on the internet. It consistently misrepresents the movement and takes words out of context to paint them as hateful misogynists. The blog is WeHuntedTheMammoth.com, written by none other than Mr. Man-Boobs himself, David Futrell. Truly, this is top-notch journalism. I applaud the writers of this Daily Kos article. Without their citation of some of the most bullshit articles on the web, this media circus surrounding men's rights activism may never have taken place. I mean, the hell with the facts and hard scientific studies from neutral sources, because why do that when you know exactly what people want to hear? I know what you're thinking. That's a pretty big claim, Rachel. Can you prove it? You bet your marvelous ass I can. I've put together a rudimentary timeline over the course of about 4 hours, looking at the dates and citations of several articles. Someone with more time could probably do more, and go even further. What I've done is try to find the earliest articles online claiming Elliot Rodger was an MRA, and then check the citations for biased sources and common links. What I found was that several cited the same Daily Kos article, or articles that cited the Daily Kos article. Others cited feminist opinion blogs or heavily feminist news sites like Jezebel. The timeline of 16 articles can be found at my blog at naughtynerdist.tumblr.com. This is only a fraction of the articles showing obvious bias and information. This isn't a conspiracy. It's first and foremost bias and just plain shitty journalism. You can't get to the truth by listening only to things you want to hear. I was glad to see that some news organizations at least tried to put forth studies and information about violence against women, but in the end they made the incredible weak link between a mass murderer and a group of men fighting for basic human rights. Just remember, kids, opinion is opinion, but science is backed by empirical evidence. If you make a claim, you have to prove it by looking at both sides of an argument, and not by choosing the side that is most convenient.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, it's pretty startling, especially since I don't know if you were party to this particular brouhaha. It was last year. Some of the people here will remember it. Was it last year or was it this year? Everything has been fading into the fog of memory, but it was when AVFM got that article on 2020. You guys remember it?
Oh, that was
2020.
Yep. How many years ago was that?
Was it last year? It was last year. Yeah, it had to have been last year, sometime in the fall. And
Yes.
Man Boobs actually cited as an example of the misogyny of A Voice for Men. He cited a comment on a page that detailed comments that would get you an insta ban. So essentially, Paul had taken Paul Elam, the founder of A Voice for Men, had taken a comment that he found on an article, and he had picked it out, and he had put it on this page, and he had said, if anybody says stuff like this, you are going to be permanently banned from the site. So from a comment that was basically used to illustrate what would get you permanently banned from AVFM, that's what Man Boobs took as evidence of the misogyny of AVFM. And then 2020 cited that comment as evidence of the misogyny of AVFM. And it was so egregiously inaccurate that at the time they were going to this is my opinion, and not necessarily true, but at that time they were going to publish that segment that they had done interviewing Paul Elam about AVFM and the men's rights movement. And they pulled the segment that was supposed to air that night, and I believe they did it because their sources were so egregiously wrong. That was such an egregious mistake that they just decided not to go through it. And I remember we were countering that mistake in the comments of the section, and people were saying, "Wow, AVFM is nothing like they're saying. There's actually women there, and this came from a page in which they described what they will not tolerate." And it was, he essentially humiliated 2020 by being such a biased source and it's amazing that once again the mainstream media has gone to him for information about us.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Well,
you
actually,
have a quick comment there, Rachel?
Yeah. The thing about this is that these are not all just these tiny sites that nobody cares about. These are actually, things like Forbes magazine. I actually watched the progression by actually looking at the times that they were posted from about, I think it was the 24th of May, and then watched it happen over at least from there to the 28th. And the change of what articles were saying from at the beginning to about then, it's almost like you start watching slowly but surely all of the mainstream sources start picking it up and hopping on the bandwagon. I saw the shift happen when I think Forbes magazine cited the Daily Kos article and hopped on board, and then it was just crazy. It went to things like the Boston Globe and just on and on and on and on. It was crazy. And it was just citing a blog. It wasn't citing statistics or anything. It was just Man Boob's blog.
Janet, go ahead, Janet.
Okay, I don't give a fuck about Man Boobs. I'm sorry. He's just an idiot of epic proportions. But I do want to address something that literally, and I know what the word literally means, it literally occurred to me today. I was reading some comments at a bunch of blogs about the men's conference, and I can't tell you these are not my own thoughts. This just simply crystallized my thoughts. But some guy said that, you know what, it's women who are mostly responsible. It's women who are mounting a hate campaign against men, and it is up to women to stop that. And something in my brain just went, holy shit. Yes, that is so true. And for people who think that's strange, well, think about this then. It's mostly white people who are mounting a campaign of hate against black people. And it's up to white people to stop that. It's not up to black people to challenge it. It's up to white people who represent the majority to stop with this fuckery. It's mostly heterosexual people who are mounting a campaign of hate against black people. And it's up to it's up to heterosexual people to stop that. It's mostly non-Jewish people mounting a campaign against Jewish people. I mean, do you see where the pattern goes here? Why are there women in this movement? Because it's up to women to use the unearned, but nevertheless utterly valid legitimacy of our voices to end this ridiculous persecution of all men, because a tiny, tiny minority of men and women have disproportionate control over the rest of us.
Well said. Very well said. It really is up to us. You cannot expect the downtrodden and the underdog to necessarily defeat a force like that. Women's voices have kind of become the majority in the United States. But I wanted to speak back to this method of evidence building that these journalists, if you want to call them that, have done that Rachel was talking about. This is something that is kind of common in feminism, and it's kind of common among social justice warrior causes. And if you look at the research in feminism, they do the same thing. They'll start out with a tiny study done on the campus of a small university where the demographic is very narrow. Maybe only girls who are 18 and 19 years old, freshmen and sophomores, or maybe from a certain area of the country, or maybe of a certain religious background if it's a religious college. And they'll have 30 to 50 people in the survey, and they'll draw conclusions from the survey, and they'll extrapolate those. And they'll grow them exponentially and say, well, this applies to everybody. And then they'll have another study that cites that study as evidence of something that they can take for granted in the second study. And they'll go through and do a third study and cite something from the second that they can take for granted in the third study, and so on until they've buried their lack of evidence between layers and layers and layers of studies and academic writing and so on. And that's basically what these journalists did, what these media did. Is they started out with a crappy little blog written by somebody who doesn't really care about getting his facts straight as much as he cares about furthering an agenda. And you start out with a couple of smaller media or lesser known media basing their reporting on him, and in the end you end up with the bigger media saying it has been reported, sources say, and so on, so that they've buried their complete lack of credibility under layers and layers of repeated citations. And this is why you can't trust the appeals to authority and appeals to credibility that feminists make and that these media make when they're talking about groups like us, because they don't really care about the evidence. They care a lot more about being able to further their agenda. And it's very easy for them to bury a complete lack of evidence under layers and layers of self-referral.
Actually, before you get in, Karen, Alex wants to ask a question. Go ahead, Alex.
I had a little bit of a question, because one of the I think it was the HuffPo reporting on it. One of the early reports said that on the computer there was found that he had visited some MRM sites. But of course, I have not. I've been trying to look that up all day, and I haven't found any other evidence to that.
I think that's just the typical conflation of pickup artist and men's rights activist that happens in the mainstream, especially the feminist mainstream. They literally are just lumping us in together with pickup artists and saying we're the same thing. So yes, he was subscribed to some pickup artist channels.
I mean, wasn't another friend of mine also was telling me about something called Wizards, where it's like older male virgins. I mean, not too old, 22 years old. And it mostly occurs in the gaming community, but they're proud to be virgins. And he was also a part of this community, more like World of Warcraft. It seems like he was involved in a great many online, kind of online fringe groups.
Well, yeah. He was also subscribed to a forum called PUA Hate, Pickup Artist Hate, that was devoted to hating pickup artists and exposing them for frauds who are bilking, vulnerable men for their money and selling them snake oil on how to pick up chicks, right? Like, I mean, he was, if we really wanted to get down to the nitty gritty and blame somebody just because he was subscribed to way more car channels, right? Motor Trend, Blue Book, than any kind of manosphere channels. And he was also subscribed to, the only political channel that he was subscribed to at all was the Young Turks. They're the only arguably politically leaning in either direction channel that he had any interest in. So, he seemed to be kind of apolitical. You have to be political in order to be an MRA. You have to be political, at least in terms of gender, to see things from a wider perspective rather than just your own sense of misery and self-pity, right? So, and frankly, I have the largest subscriber list. Like, I'm the biggest men's rights channel on YouTube. He wasn't subscribed to me that I know of. He never watched or liked or favorited a video of mine. As far as we know, he never went anywhere near A Voice for Men, which is the largest men's rights website on the internet, right? Like, he didn't mention feminism or men's rights activism in the entirety of his 140-page manifesto.
Well, wait a second. I think he did mention feminism once, like some sort of feminist, get rid of the feminist dystopia or something.
Not story. Not in his life story. He mentioned it in an offhand, in a comment on a forum.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
On a forum.
So it would probably be classified in the same sense that he also mentioned in a forum that he would release a virus. If he could, he would release a virus that would kill every man except for him.
I actually think that it would be more on the level of, I really like BMWs. Right? Because if he only mentions it once, right, and that's the end of it, and then he does not mention it again in the entirety of his 140-page life story, that just tells me that, like Rachel says, Pokemon. It's Pokemon that's to blame. Pikachu. And his misogyny attack. Pikachu.
Pika! Well, the thing with he wasn't actually associated. To answer your question, he didn't actually go to any men's rights channels. He didn't involve himself in any of our forums, at least the public ones. And so far nothing has emerged really concrete. I mean, if you go to the Forbes article, they gave an entire list of what he was actually engaged in, what he was looking at online. But the other thing is that when you read his manifesto, what he has to say about, and he doesn't really have a philosophy of society. It's just one long scream from the id, right? What he would have to say about his situation would have been the direct opposite of what he would have picked up had he encountered the men's rights movement and spent any time talking to us and talking to our philosophers and our theorists and the people who just sort of hang around and think. I mean, because the whole idea that he was basing his entire sense of value and life purpose on approval from women, on sexual behavior, well, and it all really boils down to approval from women, well, that's the first thing that we would challenge, is the idea that you do base your sense of self as a man on approval from women. And that's, I mean, if you're going to say that he was a men's rights activist, I mean, why his manifesto was the exact opposite of what we would be talking about in this circumstance, if we were to talk about the idea of what we base your identity on is not to base it on approval. I don't think there's much focus on women, but I know, having been involved in the men's rights movement, I certainly have gotten over a lot of that desire to base my identity on approval as well. And usually with men's rights, we don't focus on the female aspect of this, but it definitely is there for men. And that's one of the first things that guys would challenge him on. Why are you basing your sense of self on approval from women? You got to diversify. And go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, no, you really said it. It's basically like if he'd come across us, what we would have told him was like, lighten up, dude. Women aren't everything, right? And you like just kind of just chill out and and take charge of your life, and maybe go into some kind of get a hobby, self-improve, just look into things that interest you. Stop longing, right? Stop desiring. You shouldn't be basing your self-esteem on how others see you, right?
Or at least
how others define you.
Try to move into a space where it's not so crippling. Well, but the reality is that he had a mental illness. This is paranoid schizophrenia. I think it was paranoid schizophrenia. Correct me if I'm wrong.
But I've heard a lot of people say it was narcissism, but just from reading a book called The Narcissism Epidemic, there's a myth that narcissistic behaviors are all about low self-esteem. That's not really the case with actual narcissists. They actually do believe they're the shiznit, right? Now, nothing that Roger said, when he's like the closest thing to a living God, blah, 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 none of it rang as sincere to me. None of it seemed like it was even remotely genuine. I mean, he knew he was not just unpopular, he was unlikable and unlovable, right? That is not the stamp of a narcissist. I would expect that paranoid schizophrenia would probably fit a little bit better, or some other personality disorder. He didn't have narcissistic complexes, he had persecution complexes. So, yeah, definitely he had some serious issues. And
what I was going to point out is that we may have been in a situation where we couldn't have helped him at all. Like we wouldn't have been able to break through something that, I mean, with a kid who's suicidal and upset that he can't seem to get what society says drums into him is his only worth, which is approval from women. We might be able to break into that a bit, but that kind of mental illness, I'm not sure we could have really done anything for him. But Alex has something she wants to say, so I'm going to pull her onto the bridge. Go ahead, Alex.
On the subject of mental illness, I mean, whether he was a paranoid schizophrenic or a narcissist, I could go either way. Narcissism, there's really no distinction between you and the outside world. If somebody next to you has a donut, it directly means you don't have it. There is always a connection between you and everything going on around you. You are everything. You are the universe, and the universe is you. And so I often have found in the Elliot Rodger kind of craze and the connection to how much he was upset by being passed over by women. Every schizophrenic and narcissist finds something to focus on, and they find something where they're the center. I don't agree with the fact that this kid, if he truly was as mentally ill as a lot of people are saying, I don't I don't see that it could have been rooted in this societal gender issue that we're talking about. I just see him as outside of it. And I see him as outside of it because of the mental illness. You have mentally ill people that focus on Jesus, Christianity, the guy in Denmark who shot a bunch of kids because someone in the government wanted to be liberal on Muslim immigrants. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. I find him to be, except for the rhetoric, except for what he's actually saying, someone outside the gender issue. I find his issue has a lot more to do with guns and mental illness, and seeing the warning signs of mental illness before somebody really can hurt somebody else or themselves. Personally, the fervor attributed to watch out for these giant gender discussions or else somebody's going to grab a gun. Well, I mean, maybe, but somebody obsessed with anything is likely to grab a gun. You know, a mentally ill person who's obsessed with, they will construct a world and use. If it was girls not having sex with him, it could have also been Halo 2. It could have also been World of Warcraft. It could have also been any number of things that went on in his life. He said that one of the most painful experiences was when his parents got divorced. It could have been that. He could have created an entire storyline over that. I usually tend to look at Elliot Rodger and try to wade through the huge emphasis on gender stuff. As applicable as it is in his rhetoric or in his diatribes, I don't find it applicable with him.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Oh, be careful with muting there, Alex. We're getting some feedback. But yeah, it's and the reality is that if this hadn't been, if polemicists who had an axe to grind about men's rights activists hadn't jumped on this bandwagon to try to lump him together with us on very, very little evidence, and even if he had visited men's rights activist sites, which he didn't, I mean, that's still very thin gruel to try to paint an entire movement by this guy. And because, like you said, he could have fixated on anything, and so like I said, if pundits hadn't jumped on this to push their particular viewpoint of men's rights activists, we probably would have been pretty much in the same boat. That this is a mental health issue. This is not something that's related to gender, really, aside from perhaps. The idea that men are more expendable, leading to a greater propensity for men to engage in self-destructive, much more often self-destructive and destructive acts. So
I mean, I gotta argue with that. I don't think that they have the same style of self-destruction, but I think women can be just as self-destructive. The women who wallow in melodrama. And who, like the woman who goes back to a relationship that is violent, or the woman who has to date guy after guy and then complain about the fact that she can't keep a boyfriend. It's the same kind of self-destruction. The woman that goes out and gets totally smashed every weekend at somebody's party and then can't remember what she did the night before. These are all self-destructive women, or destructive behaviors. They're just a little more cowardly because they put the responsibility for the self-destruction on another person in the mind of the person who's being self-destructive.
Go ahead, Alex.
I was just, well, in reference to that, I wonder if always, I mean, just because somebody is being self-destructive doesn't mean they're, by and large, necessarily always not self-reflective. Goes for men and women. The other thing that I wanted to say about Elliot Rodger was what I think a lot of people are doing, feminists, non-feminists, intellectuals. I think what a lot of people are doing are hoping that there's a connection between Elliot Rodger and the MRM, because it's a really easy way to address something I've probably asked several of you on the phone, which is, being afraid of some of the more inflammatory graphics and ad campaigns put out by the MRM, worrying about that titillating the wrong crowd. And there is no example of that yet. And I think a lot of people that are a little worried about that probably wanted Elliot Rodger to be that example. He's not, in my opinion, but I do still think that that's a worthwhile subject to kind of explore. That, you know, you could have people that not just mentally ill people, but violent people and attach themselves to the movement, and then some of the allowances, some of the, if your wife hits you, you hit her back, or the ad campaigns, the one with the baby with the words written all over them, could just more either titillate or enrage people that are prone to violence, whether they're men or women. But I guess most people are afraid of men. And I guess I do think that a lot of people are trying to make the point with Elliot Rodger. It just doesn't work because he's mentally ill. He's not just and he's not even part of the MRM. But I think they want to open that discussion.
Yeah, I can. I see what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree that the kind of stuff that we've put forward would incite that kind of behavior. And then I could turn it around and say, what about the stuff that feminists are putting forward? Do they incite bad behavior from women?
I think sometimes I would say some of it does. I mean, particular examples, I guess, would be imagery of the girls with the black eyes and stuff, and saying, when is it okay to hit your wife? That kind of thing. And I would wonder whether that, for someone who gets off on being violent, whether that like perpetuates it. Now, on the feminism side, I would say some of the ad campaigns, you know, the "Don't Be That Guy," which I know you guys take huge objection to because it paints all men as predatory. The ad campaigns "Don't Be That Guy," painting all men as predatory, give women more of a sense of confidence, younger women more of a sense of confidence, and the wrong crowd can kind of use that to treat a guy very badly, to sort of, you know, what would you guys be worried about in the opposite way? I guess is a question I would wonder. I've already expounded on what I would be worried about with some of the MRM material titillating the wrong crowd. But what would you guys be worried about? What are some of the examples of stuff you guys have seen?
Well, first of all, we don't really have to go too far for some incredibly violent rhetoric from the feminist crowd, including rhetoric, radfems, radical feminists, radical militant feminists, including rhetoric that is essentially saying that they would kill women like us as well, because we are male identified, or we are ciphers of the patriarchy, or for whatever reason that they have. In fact, I received a death threat, or pretty close to a death threat on my YouTube channel that evolved out of feminist rhetoric, and this individual, who happened to be a man, to use feminist rhetoric as a starting point, and gradually, step by step, justified to himself killing me. And it was really chilling. And the reason why was because I was undermining the other women, and by that I became a threat to other women. Therefore, I could be disposed of in the service of protecting other women. And it was very chilling. And I think that's something that can definitely come out of this kind of us versus them rhetoric of the problem is patriarchy, the problem is men. And then it doesn't just become let's eradicate the men, but let's eradicate everyone who is carrying the taint of the men. And that evolves sort of out of the whole idea of men oppressing women throughout history. And I've had feminists tell me that men have oppressed women ever since there were men and women women to be oppressed and men to oppress them, which, 300,000 years apparently. And the idea that men went out of their way to oppress their wives, their sisters, their mothers, their daughters, essentially the two groups of people throughout human history that have been closest together are men and women, because we have to be together to create family. In order to say that men would oppress women with any kind of anything approaching the kind of oppression between tribes, you would have to say that men are sociopathic. And if men haven't developed compassion for women through, I guess 300,000 years of living with them, of making children with them, of creating homes with them, of raising them, of being raised by them, of being raised with them, then what is a political movement going to do? What is a poster campaign going to do to change men's minds if all of that hasn't changed men's minds? And that kind of rhetoric, that kind of idea that there's that there's been an oppression of women by men throughout history, that leads directly to the kind of violence that I was threatened with, because men become a taint. And this is where the radical feminism comes from. They take it to the logical conclusion. If 300,000 years of being in such an intimate relationship with women hasn't caused men to develop compassion and empathy towards them, then nothing ever will. Therefore, we kill them. And therefore, we also kill women who are identified with them. And it's so yeah, that's the kind of thing that sort of makes me concerned about what feminists promote as like their theories, and then the other thing is that when you're going to promote something as being descriptive of reality, like they say feminist theory is, well, then it's a science, and if it's a science, then it's not immoral to question it. So, and that's the other thing. If feminism really, it does describe reality, if feminist theory, if patriarchy theory really does describe reality, then it's based on reason, it's based on logic, it's a science, it can be tested, and it should be questioned because science invites questioning. And I'm going to cede the floor to Karen because I've talked long enough.
Well, one of the things that gets me is that there was an entire push by feminists in the 80s and the 90s to de-gender a whole bunch of words: policemen, firemen, chairman, all of these things, because words matter, right? And the gendering of words matter. And if you call somebody a chairman, right, then women will believe, they will internalize the idea that that kind of job, that kind of position of power is not something that they can aspire to, right? But yet we have a movement that has named the force of oppression that harms everybody after men, patriarchy, and that names the force for justice that will defeat that oppression after women, feminism. And they don't seem to see anything odd about that. And it's like, when men actually come out and say, and they subscribe to something called standpoint theory, where everybody's perspective is valid, its perception is reality, and so how you perceive things from your particular standpoint, that means that your perception is valid. And yet when men say, we feel blamed by your rhetoric, we feel like you're saying women have problems and men are the problem, right, by your rhetoric, they say, that your feelings of being blamed are completely invalid. Our intention isn't to blame you, right? And it blows my mind how those kinds of double standards work within feminism, that they don't understand how, if chairman or fireman or policeman is not a good word because it discourages girls, that patriarchy, right, is an indictment of all men. It's essentially saying that any system where men are in charge is necessarily an unjust system of oppression, and therefore the sort of the extrapolation from that is that men are necessarily unjust. Like, I don't understand how they can live in that tiny little ideological bubble that they have, right? That they just cannot see. They will say, words hurt, and then they will scream, smash patriarchy, because, the mere fact that mostly men are in charge, makes the system unjust. It blows my mind. It really, really does.
I would have to say so too. Like that I actually ask people that question. So you're saying that men being in power automatically means that they will use that power to hurt women or to oppress women? Because sure, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I mean, are you guys under the impression that people in general are inherently good?
Oh God, I don't think there is. I don't think there is a good or bad. I think there's what works.
Right.
I don't go with moral relativism is something I shy away from, but moral absolutes as well I shy away from. So I just, you just have to look at what works, and yeah.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wonder, because I find that given the opportunity, groups of human beings, whether once oppressed or oppressed in the future, that given the opportunity, and this was done in the experiments in the 1970s, sending college kids into prisons and having them act that out, that eventually the strive for power will ultimately turn any group, whether it's because of gender, race, or random lottery drawing, that the power has a corruptive element to any human. And I wouldn't say inherently good, but I find that human beings eventually will just turn on each other. And in this case, I'm very interested that this growing turning is becoming gendered.
Well, just to speak to that, now there's a huge difference between groups of people that are fairly well delineated, like tribal groups or racial groups or ethnic groups, and the kind of intimacy, the exchange between men and women in general, men and women within an ethnic group, within a tribal group, within a racial group. So saying that men are in charge leads to men oppressing women, the way that having one group of people that has a defined characteristic different than another group of people, but doesn't have to. They don't rely on each other for family, basically. I think that isn't really I don't think it's a solid proposition. Now. And one other thing is that when a group of people, like when we put men in the position that society expects them to be in the position of power, because often men don't have a choice about this issue, when they are essentially forced into positions of power or expected to assume positions of leadership, in the process of assuming those positions of leadership, they sacrifice compassion. They sacrifice the ability to command compassion from other people. And that this is a proven psychological phenomenon. When we see people in a position as having more agency, we see one group of people as having more agency than another, we don't care about them as much. We put a crown on the man's head, we don't care if we lop it off the next day. It's called moral typecasting, and we would rather see people who we see as having agency suffer than people who we see to be vulnerable suffer. So in the whole process of being put into a role of headship, a role of leadership, men are forced to assume a social position where they cannot command compassion to the same degree as women. And that's exactly what we see throughout history, is that while women may have been in a so-called subordinate role, I would call it more of an informal leadership role, men have, in the more overt leadership role, have also had to bear the most physical sacrifice for their communities in wartime, in fending off violent beasts. And also, if you read the records, for example, just a little less than 100 years ago during the Great Depression, families would essentially turn their sons out of the house to go find find a living, but essentially they were turning their sons out to basically die, to either survive or die, and most likely die, because they couldn't afford to feed them. So that's the position that men were in throughout history, is that yes, they were in the positions of overt power, but at the same time, in being forced to assume those positions of overt power, they lost the compassion that women were given because they were seen as vulnerable, and they were treated as more expendable. They had to take the physical sacrifices. And I think that Rachel or Crystal, they have been waiting so patiently. So do you guys have something to add to where the topic has drifted to?
Oh gosh, I have no. Well, I was going to say that the idea that cultural misogyny caused the Roger murders is completely ridiculous. Mainly because you can't say that. You can't say that cultural misogyny is both everywhere and the cause of this at the same time, because it manifested. If you're going to say that it manifested in these kinds of mass shootings that happen around, they're rarer than I think Karen said, getting struck by lightning inside of your living room. And
on a clear day. On
a clear day. but they're saying this cultural misogyny is everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's infecting everybody, and it's just a really big threat. I'm sorry, I can hear myself. Background on your side, Alex.
Alex, I'm going to have to get you to mute your microphone. Okay, I think that's better.
Sorry?
Now. Just mute your microphone because we're getting feedback from you, I believe.
Oh yeah, no problem.
But it can't be manifesting just specifically in these shootings because they're so rare. So it's either really, really prevalent or almost non-existent. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Well, it's either normal. Like, this is the thing. This is the thing that gets me, is the whole idea that Elliot Rodger was just like, oh, when in Rome, this society is really misogynistic, and it teaches me that I'm entitled to women's bodies, and and that I deserve all the hot babes that I could possibly want, right? Now, obviously society didn't teach him those things because society has reacted with complete and total losing their shit outrage over what he did, and the fact that he actually targeted women among the men that he also targeted, right? The fact that he felt entitled to, I won't even say he felt entitled to, he just wanted. He wanted a relationship. He wanted women to be attracted to him. He wanted women to desire him and appreciate him and admire him, right? Those are the things that he wanted. Now, it just boggles my mind that you can have feminists saying, this points to a society that sees women as objects to have sex with, when in reality, what he wanted from these women was admiration, appreciation, desire, all of these things that objects simply can't feel. You can't get that out of a blow-up doll, right? You certainly can't get that out of a passed-out co-ed at a party. And if he really felt entitled to women's bodies and saw them merely as objects to have sex with, one would think that he would not be a 22-year-old virgin, would he? He'd be a 22-year-old rapist.
Exactly. And none of these statistics really connect the two. They don't connect. They don't prove that there is rampant cultural misogyny in the West that's just creating a mountain of violence. We've actually been seeing less and less crime over the years. It's just, it doesn't really add up that there's suddenly just this wave of misogyny that's worse now than ever before.
Oh, there's actually been a decline in rape. There actually has been a decline in the statistics. You would think that feminists would come forward and be like, wow, okay, this is actually great. No, that's absolutely just completely brushed under the rug. Nobody speaks of that. And it's consistently displayed exactly as this huge mountain of misogyny that's consistently growing. And another thing with, this whole issue of how quickly the media has jumped on this and how the feminist movement has piggybacked on this tragedy to slander the men's human rights movement, it's really grotesque, because what they're actually doing is they've become like anti-human rights. I mean, how could you say, oh my God, here's these men standing up for their human rights, that is terrible, let's do everything in our power to silence, squash, slander that movement, because that can never happen, because why? And then I have been reading different articles and such, and I see this recurring thing of, oh, well, why would you, when an MRA steps up and clarifies, hey, this is not who we are, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, oh, you're just justifying, how could you say that feminists shouldn't say things like this? Like, well, wait a second, the feminists were lying. Okay, they spread a bunch of lies and slander. When MRAs step up and are saying, hey, these are lies, here are facts, those little things called facts, here they are, and here we're showing you everything that we stand for, and for feminists to say, oh, well, you shouldn't be able to do that because, you can't stand up for yourself because that just shows how evil you are. But you can't stay quiet either because that just shows how evil you are too. So it's yeah.
If you stand up for yourself, that proves that feminism needs to exist.
If you stand up for yourself, you're attacking them.
Yeah.
Right. And
if you say nothing at all, they say, oh, well, what do those fucking MRAs do? They do nothing at all.
Right.
It's a no-win scenario, but exactly. Alex wanted to get in here, so take it away, Alex.
I just wanted to make a point that in people I've talked to in pursuing this story, a lot of people have very close to no idea about some of the actual goals of the MRM. And it takes a while for me to get around to explain, no, it's not anti-abortion. No, it's not primarily about the rape apology. A lot of it started with things like more recognition for male victims of sexual assault, shared parent recognition that domestic violence is a shared responsibility between the genders, things like that. And I have not found a lot of people. I would argue that it is not necessarily simply the feminists getting it wrong and coming out with a lot of propaganda, but that to a few people's own admittance, the more inflammatory stuff is out there first to get the clicks, and then the more you talk about it, the more they start researching it. And in a lot of people's blogs, everyone said, pro-MRM people have said, the more I looked into it, I realized that these were real issues. I think that a lot of the situation lies in the fact that it doesn't seem to be at the forefront of MRM literature or just at the forefront. A lot of the actual real nitty-gritty kind of rational points that you guys are trying to make doesn't seem to be the first things out there. I mean, one of the most hit, I think Janet Bloomfield said that she had written something about the Steubenville rape case, and drunk whores need to take responsibility for themselves, and that's what gets the attention. And do you guys think that there's any that possibly part of the misconception of the MRM is because at the forefront there's the kind of more enticing shock value stuff up there?
Well, yeah, I would agree, but that's not really like most of my work is either examining psychological pressures or dealing with the statistics of male victimization by female sexual predators. And I mean, if you look at the men's rights movement, the vast majority of the writing is on these issues. We don't choose what the mainstream media or feminists pay attention to. You guys choose that. So
yeah, I mean, look at it this way, right? If those articles, right, that get the clickbait, right, the etiology of rape by Paul Elam, or that one comment I made on a Reddit forum that got massive play, and I still have it thrown in my face because somehow saying getting slapped is not as bad as getting beaten half to death, right? And therefore, I'm a horrible person because I'm not willing to equate those two things. Like you look at, that's the only reason why we even have people looking at the issues. That's the only reason why people are going to the websites and looking into this. And then they stick around and go, oh, wait, this one article was really bad, but he said it was satire right there in the body of the article. And, he's not recommending it for anyone. And, I mean, I think I remember one that he did, Paul Elam did, you don't decide whether you were raped, I do. Right? And it was basically, the first half of the article was him reversing the genders on Mary Koss's position about female and male rape. Right? Mary Koss, a consultant with the CDC, she consulted and basically developed the definitions they used to define what was rape and what was not rape. And these were all her opinions about men who'd been forced to have sex by women. And Paul Elam had written the first half of the article basically regurgitating her positions, just reversing the genders. And then halfway through he said, are you outraged yet? You should be. Right? And then said, these are not my positions. Right? These are the positions of Mary Koss, but they don't apply to women, they apply to men. They don't apply to female victims, they apply to male victims, right? And this is the person who is in charge of defining what rape is for the CDC.
For the Center of Disease Control.
Yeah. And, so we have these super, super hyper provocative articles that get people coming, to us and reading. And then they look at some of the other stuff that we're saying. And most of when I just talk to regular people, most of them are very much in agreement. I mean, like, I don't have, nobody that I work with has any problem with what I do. My boss doesn't have any problem. She's told me that if ever there's a phone campaign trying to get me fired, she'll be like, yeah, well, we always knew Karen was a little weird, but she shows up and she's reliable. Goodbye. Click. Don't ever call here again. Right? I mean, I think that our opinions are largely mainstream opinions, but there's this resistance, right, to anybody paying attention to them, paying real attention to them. It's like the homeless guy lying in the street that people just step over and keep walking, right, until he starts doing something that makes people feel really uncomfortable, right? And then all of a sudden, he's got your attention. That's really, I think, what these provocative articles are doing, is it gets the attention that we would not have gotten if we were just being reasonable and calm and rational. I mean, like, the 30 years of reasonable, calm, and rational. What did it get Warren Farrell? It got him accusations of incest apology and rape apology and misogyny and all kinds of stuff because, he's...
Right. And the thing is, they have to also be willing to do the work to actually, open up to a view besides the one that they've had. Because, I mean, I just did that video called "What is an MRA?" I did a video just compiling a few of the points of what an MRA is and distinguishing between anti-PUA, a PUA, which has nothing to do with an MRA. And there'll still be people who are like, "Oh, I only watched it for 2 minutes," and then you talked about feminism, and I had to go. And here's the thing: I've watched countless videos of feminists. I've watched full through their videos because I'm not going to just start a video that they start, that I'm going to talk about after and just be like, oh, I was confronted, I can't finish it. So people have to actually work through whatever they're confronted with, see the new material, look at the facts, because I put a whole list of links, and I've seen, MRI videos have facts. There's always a list of facts underneath where people can think for themselves and actually do the research. It's all about people starting to think for themselves and not just take it as feminism said so, so God said so, you know?
Yeah, and actually, to add on Karen's point, when my husband goes out into the town that we live in and he talks about these issues, he has a fairly positive reception when he talks to people, especially women. Apparently, we may have some cashiers who, grocery store cashiers who may be listening in and becoming fans soon. But there isn't, I think, as much resistance on. I mean, look at the defeated shared parenting bill in Canada. 80% support in the general population. 80%, and it was defeated. This is a top-down situation. Essentially, our betters are trying to define for us what we should think, and I'm not going to have any of it, at least not personally. And actually, at that point, I think maybe we should segue into talking about how we became men's rights activists, because I think this in particular would probably interest Alex, and I'm sure, and it is also the topic of the show. So I mean, we're an hour in, we might as well start the topic of the show. So, Karen, did you want to talk about how you became a men's rights activist?
Well, I was immersed in my career as an author of dirty books, and I was subscribed to a bunch of romance and erotica sort of writer and reviewer websites, and I happened to be on one day, and somebody mentioned in a blog post or something like that let's go make fun of this guy over here, and left a link, and the link led to a post on a fairly hardcore masculine website, right? Red pill website. Actually an extremely hardcore one. That was basically complaining that hard science fiction, you cannot find hard science fiction anymore. Science fiction always has some romantic element or some kind of soap opera subplot, because you have to please the ladies. You have to always please the ladies. And I went in there, sort of with an open mind and read it, and I thought, well, that's kind of true. But then I came across a comment by one of the commenters who said, well, the new Star Trek isn't that bad. I totally ripped it off the internet and watched it 10 times. And I finally went in and I commented, what the fuck is wrong with you, right? Why would anybody make a movie that appeals to you? Why would anybody make a $300 million movie that appeals to you, the demographic most likely to rip it off the internet, to not pay for it, to not drag the boyfriend to the theater, to not buy the DVD gift set, right? But to rip it off the internet, right? Women drag their boyfriends to theaters. Women, buy their boyfriends the DVD gift set, right? And they aren't going to do it for a movie that they aren't going to enjoy. Like, what the hell, right? What a thing to whine about. If you want to be a demographic that entertainers pander to, that the entertainment industry panders to, pay for it, like everybody else. Anyhow, once I got that off my chest, I went and I looked at a whole bunch of their other articles, and I found that a lot of their complaints were very valid. A lot of the things that they were posting were extremely valid and extremely, like, things about divorce, alimony, domestic violence, sexual violence, the whole bit, right? And on top of that, when I started commenting there, they did not give me the smallest break for being a woman. Right? They treated me like they treated everybody else, right? And basically what I saw there looked a lot more like my life than what I saw on the romance review blog, where I mentioned that I wasn't a feminist. I was an egalitarian, not a feminist, and got about 300 nasty comments judging me for not being a feminist. So, just for not using the word. So, yeah, it was just a little bit, jarring, arriving at the men's rights movement, the manosphere, all of that, but but it certainly looked a lot more like reality than the feminist movement, so I decided to stick around.
Okay, thank you, Karen. And I'm gonna drag Hannah onto center stage. Come on, Hannah. I know you have an epic story.
I don't know if it's so much epic. I think it's a little weird. Honestly, my history with the movement is kind of on and off because my internet service has been on and off over the years. But I've been kind of red pill most of my life, although I did have a long stint where the combination of the medications I was on for my asthma made me a little nuts. So I don't know if you would count that part or not. But I have a history of seeing the people around me abused. And when I say abused, I mean I had a friend in college whose girlfriend had him down on the floor, beating him with a glass paperweight, and the cops arrested him because she said she was scared. Had an ex-boyfriend of mine whose ex-wife, when they had been married, used to throw heavy objects at him from across the room. And I mean like the clothes iron and standing lamps and stuff like that. And everybody thought I was nuts for calling her abusive because she was female. You know, these were things that I saw going on around me, and I've always kind of questioned why people didn't hold them accountable for their behavior. You know, how can you just say, oh, you know, well, it's a girl, she didn't mean anything by it, it's harmless. You know, if you pick up a clothes iron, the thing weighs a couple of pounds, and you throw it at somebody and it hits them in the head, it does the same amount of damage getting hit in the head by a couple of pounds of metal, no matter what hand it came out of. But it really cemented for me when it was my own immediate family that it was happening in. And my husband's a divorcee, and we went through a really rough time over custody, and we went through a really rough time over child support, where we saw our court system here in Ohio allowing dishonesty on the ex-wife's part, where we saw, you know, the judge ordering my husband to pay an amount of child support based on more income than he actually had. The idea being that he could be earning more if he just got a better job. And that was during the beginning of the Bush recession. And as the Bush recession got worse and became the Obama depression, nobody seemed to want to acknowledge how difficult it was for a guy to change jobs. You know, the ex-wife was allowed to move 4 hours away from where we lived, and we were just expected to tolerate that. But when we moved to be closer to the kids, that was considered irresponsible. And so I went online looking in men's rights forums, really fathers' rights forums, and I actually started doing that in about 1999 when my son was born, because we had already started having problems with the visitation. We already learned that the police will not enforce a visitation order in multiple counties in Ohio, and including the one that we lived in at the time. And at that time, there really wasn't a lot that, you know, you could look at and say, "Oh, this will help. Oh, I can do that, and it'll make things better." There was a lot of information about what was wrong. There wasn't a lot of information about what you could do to save your situation. The main advice that I could find that worked was that we couldn't do anything without a lawyer. You can't navigate the family court system without a lawyer. And so I spent quite a bit of time researching in those forums, and then sort of dropped out of it when our income level hit such a low spin that we couldn't afford internet. And was offline for a few years. And about that time, well, that's when the That's when the vexatious litigant case began. And this was a close friend of mine. I've written about this on A Voice for Men. The title of the article, I believe, is 7 Years in Hell. One of my best friends from college, also a divorcee, got together with an old high school friend, and they got married, and he has a daughter, who at the time, he and his ex-wife had joint custody, and it was that 50-50 custody where she went back and forth between the two homes. And there was a lot of neglect, and there was a lot of suspected abuse that couldn't be proved going on at the child's mother's house. And then one day, the child's mother's boyfriend called the father and said, "Come get your daughter," and he had beaten her. And this was a 4-year-old little girl. She had bruises all over her face. It was horrible. And so, they came and got her. And to my friend's credit, he just went and picked up his daughter, didn't say anything, didn't do anything, just showed up, got his daughter, and took her home. And they went into to Child Protective Services, and they got protective custody. And that's when the false accusations started. And she started by going into court and saying that she was afraid of him. This would be the mother, the ex-wife, started by going into court saying she was afraid of him, got herself a restraining order, waited a couple of days, and made a false claim that he had violated it. She had been already doing a couple of minor things. She accused him of being a cult member. It's actually said he had a demon tattooed on his arm, and the local police in my area don't know the difference between a demon and a Disney character. They questioned him extensively about the tattoo of a cartoon character on his arm, but this continued. This case continued for about 7 years. They dragged him off to jail 5 different times during that 7 years for questioning. One of the occasions was for an accused drive-by greeting that never happened, and really shouldn't have been accused because she had gotten a case delayed by telling a judge that she was going to be out of town that weekend, and then accused him of a drive-by greeting in town, and that was overlooked, but he was still put in jail overnight for questioning. And by questioning, I mean they throw you in a cell and let you talk to the bars, and that's pretty much it. You're in there for questioning all night, where nobody talks to you, and then you get bailed out and you go home, but you're not under arrest. You have to post bail, but you're not under arrest. They confiscate all your stuff, but you're not under arrest. You have to go with them, but you're not under arrest. So they don't have to read you your Miranda rights. They don't have to really recognize any of your rights. And they can hold you for 24 hours. Or if they take you in on a Friday, they can hold you over the weekend if somebody doesn't get you out quickly enough. And throughout that case, I at first, when we first started seeing this happen, we thought, oh, well, since she's lying, there's not going to be any evidence. And therefore, this is going to fall apart in court, and it's all going to be over real soon. And then she accused him of rape. And it was a ridiculous accusation, not just because he wouldn't do it, but because her story was impossible. Like, really impossible. He could prove he was somewhere else. And so the DA that she was dealing with let her change her story twice before his lawyer finally went in and said, if you keep going on this fishing trip, we're going to file charges. We're going to take legal action. And eventually they dropped it. But it took his lawyer threatening discrimination type charges before they would stop letting her fish for a time when he couldn't account for his whereabouts. Well, by this time, we were monitoring him. And when I say we, there were about 20 of us. all of his friends. We took turns just making sure that he was not alone at any point in time. And this guy has had a few years where the only time that he was not directly next to another person was when he was in the bathroom. It was the only privacy he had was when he went to the bathroom. So this was so weird to me, seeing this happen and realizing that the problem wasn't just, little things here and there. That it wasn't just crap that I'd seen happen that was not connected to anything. It was in the system. That I started writing about it. There's a site called gather.com that is for mostly for blogging and news writing and artistic expression and everything. It bills itself as social networking for adults, which is kind of ironic considering the response that my writing got. The vexatious litigant, when she found my articles, well, that's also how I got to Reddit. I should probably mention Reddit because that's really how I found my way to A Voice for Men. As I was writing this stuff, I realized, Gather's a small community. This was stuff that people really needed to know about, because if the problem is in the system and not just in a few idiots out there, then something needs to be done about it. And I went looking for, communities that might be more interested in that particular story and posted links to it and sort of tried to get discussion going on it and everything. Reddit was one of those communities. On my first Reddit account, I cannot remember the name of it. It had something to do with sidelines or shadows or something, because of the fact that I was a witness. It was like sideline witness or sideline shadow or something like that. But then that got shadow banned, and I went to Faywillow, which was an old nickname. And then I got shadow banned under that account again. And that was, I pretty much figured it out. It was for posting links to that story. I went back and got shadow banned a second time under Faywillow and eventually settled on Onero's Grip, which has recently been shadow banned also. So now I'm Onero's Grip won't STFU. We'll see how long I have that account. In any case, the vexatious litigant found the blog posts and just went apeshit. And she went to the organization that had been helping her, which, if you read 7 Years in Hell, it gives a better description of that case. It's a long article, but it's quite dramatic. She had been backed by a domestic violence victims advocacy group, and she brought some of them and some of her other internet. Oh, to answer the question in chat, shadow banned means I can see my stuff, but nobody else can. So if I comment on something, I can see it. So it looks like I'm not banned. It looks like my account is active. Nobody else can see it. And the only way you find out usually is when a moderator of a subreddit tells you, because you show up in red for them, and they have to approve everything you say, or it doesn't get seen by anybody else. This is very sneaky. But in any case, the domestic violence victims advocacy group that had been backing the vexatious litigant, and I call her that because she's actually on the vexatious litigant list in Ohio, which is a fairly short list. I think there's less than 200 people on it. They showed up on my blog posts and flamed me to the point where I had somebody tell me I should die in a fire. I had somebody tell me I should get raped so I would know what it was like. This is something they're saying to a random stranger in a world where feminists say 1 in 4 women will have been. So they had a 25% chance there that they were talking to somebody that already knew and just assumed they didn't, that I didn't. But they were violent, and they were threatening, not overtly threatening, I'm going to do this, except the one that threatened to call Child Protective Services on me. That was a definite threat. And then she threatened to sue the site, and the site censored my writing. And I thought that was fair because, after all, when a vexatious litigant threatens to sue you, you take that seriously. So I took a step back and I reevaluated how I was covering this story. Whether I really should be covering it tabloid style or whether I should be writing about the phenomenon instead of this individual. And that's where the first 4 pages of Breaking the Glasses came from. Breaking the Glasses is my blog. It's my take on gender issues where I'm trying to look at them from a standpoint that takes away the dogma filters, the way that people are accustomed to looking at gender issues. And you wipe that clean and you try looking at it just from a human to human perspective. And it totally destroys a lot of feminist assertions to take away those dogma filters. And once you look at it as just people talking about people, you start to see the bigotry and sexism inherent in some of the claims that feminists make, and a lot of the circumstances that men are subjected to. And but that was pretty much how I ended up writing that blog. Was coming from that story and having that story censored and realizing that just writing about that one case wasn't going to effectively communicate the problem, and that it wasn't the most productive use of the information to get the issue across. And I guess that's where I am now. I ended up on Reddit. I was on Reddit clear back when there was Reddit, and then there were subreddits. Reddit wasn't all subreddits, and now it's all subreddits. So I've been there for a few years, and then, like I said, all the commenting and discussion and everything, and then I started reading A Voice for Men. I started seeing feminists visit the subreddit to attack A Voice for Men, and began arguing with them as well, and that's kind of how I ended up making the connection to Karen and Allison and talking with 2 of them. And it's kind of how we got together as the Honey Badgers. Obviously, there was also the conflict in there that sort of broke us off from the Lady MRAs, but that's more of a Reddit discussion than it is a men's rights discussion. So I guess that's it.
Well, thanks, Hannah. And I'm going to pull Crystal onto the stage now. Go ahead, Crystal.
Hi. So I grew up with women that didn't call themselves, well, some of them, I guess, call themselves feminists, but mostly they didn't call themselves feminists, but they were. And my mother would tell me every day, you can't trust men. Men are evil. It's either every day or every other day. Until I finally got to an age where I told her, no, that's not true. And I started to tell her, teach her, that's just not true. It was something I grew up with. So about the age of 18, I started to, I internalized it though. It came into, I internalized it. So around the age of 18, that's when I became a feminist. And it was in my 20s when I almost left feminism because it just came really clear that, at the age of 18 too, I started working in the sex industry as an escort, dom, and stripper. So I saw how feminists treated everybody in the escort, in the sex industry too. They would go back and forth between, hating us and liking us. And the only way that they could possibly fathom as to why we'd be in the sex industry is because we wanted to take advantage of men. That was their story, and that was the story that they put out there in front of us, and actually hurt us a lot because then people, it became such a taboo, everybody thought, oh, we're just out to take whatever we can from men, treat them like crap. And then what it did was perpetuate that story for the new people coming into the sex industry. They came into not new, the sex industry has been going on for a long time, but there are people who came into the sex industry with that mindset and felt supported in that mindset. Like that was the only possible way that a woman could be in the sex industry, is if she wanted to treat men like crap. Which, we didn't subscribe to that. I didn't subscribe to that, and a lot of the women that I was with did not subscribe to that. So I saw how that was, but I was still a feminist. So in about my 20s, I almost left feminism because I was like, this is such hate. You guys are so anti-male. I can't. This is ridiculous. So, but there was one feminist who was like, no, we're not all like that, and that's not who we really are. And so I kind of adopted that story. Not all feminists are like that, or I'm not like that. So it wasn't until about excuse me, a couple years ago, I started thinking about, what I wanted to do to support men. At one point, I talked to one of my uncles that I was like, I want to do, a group for men who've been raped, and he kind of dismissed it as, oh no, that's not a lot. Not a lot of men have been raped or whatever. So I was like, what? I don't know, So I started to question things, and I was like, this just doesn't sound right. So anyway, it was about 7 months ago, I created a Facebook group called Loving and Celebrating Men. Well, it's now called Loving and Celebrating Men. And I started to do research online for how I started as a Facebook page, because I was reading through these groups I was in, these tantra groups, and there was so much shaming of men and these women just making really shitty comments about men's bodies, and it really pissed me off. And I was like, men need to feel supported with their bodies as well, and this is horseshit, and I'm fucking tired of it. So I created the Facebook page. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to start now. So I started Googling, and I was like, okay, trying to find things, okay, how to support men. I started Googling loving men and all this stuff. And all that came up was what men can do for women. There was nothing came up about, how to share your love for men, how to share your support for men. None of that came up. Every single thing that came up regarding loving men was articles like how men can love women, how men can do this for women. And I was like, wow, this is ridiculous. So I kept searching, and actually a couple years prior, I'm not the best at this chronological stuff, but a couple of years prior, I had met up with Harry Crouch from NCFM, and he had given me some information, and the book Loving Men, Respecting Women, The Future of Gender Politics by Tim Goldick. And I was looking through that, but I was still a feminist, so I still wasn't fully getting it. So anyway, while I was Googling for my page and the group that I created, I came across AVFM. And I came to AVFM, and I'm like, I'm a feminist. And so a lot of people were questioning, like, what? And I'm like, I have this page, and I want to empower men. At the time, it was called Cock Consciousness. That was the first way it was called, was Cock Consciousness. And so some guys were like, well, we're not just our cocks, so why are you calling it that? And I was like, okay, well, obviously I have to change the name if I have to keep explaining it. So, obviously I'm missing, the word's not right. So I came up with the term, with the title Loving and Celebrating Men, which really fits what I want to do and what I want to share. It includes men's bodies and every part of men. So I'm talking on AVFM, and people were like, well, why are you calling yourself a feminist if you say you're supporting men? And I was like, well, I'm not that feminist, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not me. So so people were like, well, this is what feminism does, and this is what it supports. And I'd already been, before I started the research, I was questioning the whole feminism thing. So I took that in, and I went into, I started to read in AVFM, and there's this one comment that this guy wrote, and I repeat this one because it really did, make me confront myself. So there's this one comment that this guy wrote on women going first on the boats, right? And he's like, I don't mind if a woman's pregnant, okay, fine, but otherwise it should just, children should go first, women if she's pregnant, and then, everybody else, it's just whoever gets to the boats first. And I remember feeling this sense of sheer horror that I never thought I would feel. And then I was terrified of myself, because I was like, why does that scare me? So I was in this like really big, like freaking out thing. I was like, oh my God, and I realized how self-entitled I felt towards, these things that I just never even thought of before. I never even, it just wasn't in my realm of thought. And then all of a sudden I was completely confronted with equality. And I was like, holy shit, that is scary. And then the fact that I thought it was scary scared the shit out of me. I was like, who the fuck am I? Oh my God. So I, became this really intense going within myself and figuring out, like, holy shit, my whole world just got flipped the fuck upside down. Where am I? Like, oh my God. So, and then I kept reading AVFM, and the more I read, the more I was able to see things, but I was still kind of like on the verge. Then I watched Karen's video on feminism and the disposable male, and after I watched that video, like I was already teetering, and that video just completely kicked me away from feminism. I was like, oh my God, this is like, holy shit, it was just definitely, a combination of everything together. And then that video was like, wow, I have been living a lie. So I started to do some more research, and then I started to do my videos, which I'm on YouTube now. And I was so pissed. I was so pissed. I was like, holy shit, like why the fuck didn't I know this before? And kind of upset, really upset with myself too, because I thought for this whole time that I was really standing for equality, and I really wasn't. And, I had this whole superiority mentality that I wasn't even aware of. So it was really terrifying to be confronted with myself. But, then I just got to it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to wake up as many fucking people as I can, because I don't, people need to know what was really happening, what it actually means to want an egalitarian society. What does that actually mean? Because, to actually recognize that what feminism, brings forward is this whole, you're a goddess. Well, no, you're not a goddess. You're a human. Welcome to planet Earth. And if you really, really want equality, then you're going to have to actually accept equality and put away superiority, because it's bullshit, So I just got into it that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wake up as many people as possible. I'm going to, get out, share as much information on the men's human rights movement as possible. And I started to lose people in my little Facebook friends list. I started, even me and some of my friends that I've known for most, a good part of my life, we actually stopped talking for a bit. And one of the people, well, a couple of them, but one of them specifically was the first one to call me a misogynist, after I proceeded to bring forward facts. I was, it was the discussion about women being represented this is in Congress or something. And I'm like, I was like, that's a kind of a smack in the face for all the men all the male politicians who have stood for women's rights, to say that if they don't have vagina, then they're not representing women. I'm like, and then at the same time, you're saying that because a woman has a vagina, she's predisposed to pick what you also want to pick in politics, because there's some sort of vagina mind meld or something that we all connect with. It didn't make, I was like, that's actually pretty freaking sexist. So because of that, I was called a misogynist. And then when I was called a misogynist, I was like, it felt like my voice was choked in my throat, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, holy crap, is this what men feel like when they talk? And I was like, how entitled am I? I've only felt it for like a day, and I'm devastated, and that opened my eyes more too. And I realized that the feminist story of misogynists everywhere was horseshit. Suddenly my life was no longer as scary as I thought it was. And, there wasn't, misogynists lurking on every doorstep, and I was like, holy shit, there's a lot less misogynists in this world than feminists say they are. Then I realized that misogynists meant anybody who disagreed with a feminist. And so that experience, I was like, wow, how the hell do, men deal with this? So anyway, that's my story. And then I became a badger, and here I am.
I actually have to agree. The first time you get called a misogynist, it's a bit of a shocker, right?
Yeah.
But then you realize, like, the first time I got called, well, the most important time I ever got called a rape apologist, which was by Naomi Wolf in a panel discussion, it was for saying that rape was a crime that was based on consent, based on state of mind, right? That is what I said. I said, this is what the crime is based on. It's not based on physical evidence. Feminists have actually gone out of their way to remove any kind of requirement for physical evidence of resistance or anything like that. So basically the only thing that differentiates it from a legal act that happens billions of times around the world every day and a crime is two people's states of mind, right? And she called me a rape apologist, and I did a fist pump. I literally didn't. I rattled her that much just by saying what was obvious, that she called me a rape apologist. So really, it's kind of a kick in the gut the first time it happens, but after a while, it's almost like you see every single incident of it as a victory.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I love the smell of misogyny in the morning. It smells like victory.
Right, it's like misogyny. I win.
There you go. Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, yeah, take it away, Rachel.
Oh gosh, it's kind of a loaded question. How did I become an MRA and a honey badger? I mean, there's a lot of places that I could start this story, but if I really, really think about it, I think that I can probably trace it from a man. Well, not a man, a teenage boy. And that teenage boy was my first serious boyfriend. And I know, no, it's not what you think. It wasn't specifically him. It's more that I think when I entered that relationship with this boy who had who had depression and suicidal tendencies and the tendency to self-mutilate and just be self-destructive, I found that at that particular point in my life, we had a lot in common. Because I had a pretty bad childhood. It was a pretty dysfunctional situation at home. I ended up in foster care. I spent about 11 months in a residential treatment facility or mental hospital for depression and suicidal, the desire to commit suicide. And when I ended up in a foster home, I managed to have my first serious relationship with this boy. And upon meeting him, I remember a girl who was a mutual friend. She said, "Listen, so-and-so wants to ask you out, but he doesn't have the courage. Ask him out, and if you like him, and don't tell him I said anything." And I thought, well, that's really weird, because I here in my mind up until that point, I was thinking, oh wow, men. They have the sort of stoicness to them. They're the ones with the bravery, and to see this guy who was way too he didn't have the courage to ask me out, and he thought that I was attractive and that I was an interesting person, and I ended up asking him out, and we were together for about a year until I had to move. And I went with him through a lot of things, you know, a lot of relapsing, things like that, and I really learned from that experience. And I'm not going to cut out the internet from this. It had a really big role, because I've been on the internet since I was about 13 years old. I've been involved in communities since then, and it was crazy. And to let you know, I'm about 27 years old. I'll be 28 later this month, and that's kind of a big deal. And I'm not talking about just, you know, a mild romance with the internet. I mean, we're talking about hardcore, involved with people and getting to know them. And one of my first experiences on the internet, I had a conversation with a boy who may or may not have committed suicide on the other end of the chat line. And that really resonated with me. In fact, that was probably the one thing that first brought out my desire to just end it all. So getting back to that relationship, after I moved on, I ended up getting involved with some people online, and I ended up sort of counseling guys. It ended up being primarily men who were expressing this desire to end it all, that things weren't worth it, that they were never going to find love, or that no one was ever going to appreciate them for who they were. And this proceeded. I ended up talking down several guys over, several years, and it just ended up happening again and again and again. And in the back of my mind, I wondered, well, shit, why is this happening to these guys? Why are they wanting to commit suicide? They have so much going for them. And, I ended up later on getting involved with, oddly enough, erotic writing. Ended up in a free speech community, and I heard a lot of different things, and by the end of that, I pretty much nothing at all could get to me. So when people hurl insults at me or say things like, oh, you're a misogynist, that didn't faze me at that point. But moving on, from that point, I think around the age of 25, I said to myself, I had a bit of a, quarter life crisis. I said, well, I'm going to get my shit together. I think it's time to reassess some things. I don't think I believe in God. And it was kind of weird, because about that time I was questioning a lot of things, what I really felt to be reality, reassessing a lot of different things. And one of the things that ended up coming up in that assessment was feminism. Do I think it's complete bullshit? Because around age of 13, I read a book entitled Girl Talk by Judith Harlan, and ever since then I had been obsessed with this idea of women being independent, taking care of themselves, not being afraid to pay for dates, treating men as their equals. And I thought, for so long, that this is what feminism was like. And then I met some real feminists. And everything went to shit. And I got involved with atheist communities, and I started talking about my skepticism about feminism. And right about that time, or I think before that, I was watching Karen's videos. Oddly enough, I think it was in my look for atheism videos, I stumbled upon Karen's videos. And then there she was. And I thought to myself, wow, I want to be like her when I grow up. And I'm 25. So I was like, then that registered. I'm like, shut up, Rachel. Shut up. So going back to all that, I started talking out and speaking out. And about the same time, I was blogging. I was blogging about atheism. I was blogging about a couple things. And then I came across the whole elevator gate shit with Rebecca Watson. And I started realizing maybe people should be talking about this a little bit more. And as I began speaking about it more, I got a lot of shit. I mean, I got a whole lot of hate, just a mile long. And I thought, well, this should be basic stuff, okay? This is not anything big, we're talking about treating men like people, okay? We're talking about not treating them like human shields or walking ATMs, people. You're equals. This should not be some kind of difficult thing. This is logical. And I realized that these people weren't logical. This was coming from emotion, and I thought back to when I thought that I was a feminist and why I was, and I think it was because I was really angry at the men in my life who had failed me. This was not about the men that I had met all along the way, all along the journey up until that point, who had been nothing but wonderful to me and had treated me well. This was about one or two people who completely fucked me over, and I was holding on to that, and I couldn't let it go. And I let it go. And I haven't looked back since. And not a single fuck was given that day. And it hasn't been given since.
Thanks, Rachel.
And I moved my blog to Tumblr, because that's where all the feminists are, and I camped out. And somewhere along the line, I heard that Allison posted, she said, well, if you have any services that you can offer to the honey badgers, please, by all means, send an email. And I said, okay, I can do some things. Or at least, but I wasn't really confident about it. I said, well, I can do some stuff. Not really all that 100% confident, because I never have been. I've been kind of a shut-in and very, very sheltered and, well, by my own choices, but and shy. And then suddenly she kind of picks me up, and I think to myself visually like the Toy Story movie, the aliens, I've been chosen, farewell my friends, I go on to a better place. And and suddenly I'm here with all these honey badgers, and they're fantastic.
Thank you, Rachel. Well, maybe I can tell a little bit about where I'm coming from. We might have to go over today, over our time limit today, but unless James jumps all over that idea with fiery anger, I guess we'll go for it and just do it. But when I was a kid, I was also a feminist, and basically because I thought feminism was about equality, and believe me, nobody is more, well, maybe there are more people who are more disappointed than me about what I eventually found feminism to be about. But when I was a kid, I was a feminist, and I was fascinated by political systems. So I read up about, democracy, republics, everything. Like I know it sounds totally weird, but that was the kind of stuff that I was into when I was a kid. And one concept in particular stuck with me, and it was why I essentially called myself a feminist, was the idea that if you had the right to vote, you should have the obligation to protect the state that you have a say in. And so my big feminist issue as a feminist was that women should have to be drafted as well as men. Of course, I think I'm pretty at that point in time. There's no real campaign to do that, but it tied into my idea that I had developed about myself to actually hold myself to the ideal of equality. So. And I must have done this when I was 14 or something, 15, 16. I decided that I wouldn't ask of men or the boys, I guess the teenage boys around me, more than I asked of myself. And I wouldn't, if I would ask myself, well, what would be expected of a man in this situation? And I would do it. So if things needed to be moved, I would roll up my sleeves and I would help move it. And I remember one particular amusing incident is there was a whole bunch of furniture that needed to be moved from one part of a building to another, and it was I was in a school at the time, and the male students got up and they did their job, and so did I. And only one of the female students, actually, seeing what I was doing, actually volunteered, and she somehow sprained her wrist without really spraining it within the first 5 minutes. But I actually hauled those desks for a good 2 hours with the guys. And then if there was a ditch to be dug, then I would go along the side of the guys, and I would pick up a shovel and I would dig it. So I would never, if there was a situation where something was expected of men, I would expect it of myself as well. And I included that in my relationships with other people, including my husband. I would say, well, what would be expected of a man in a relationship with a woman? And I would try to aim for that standard of behavior. And I mean, it took a really long time because there was a lot of stuff that I had to unlearn as a woman, as a girl, of kind of behaviors and expectations that I had to constantly hammer on. But it all came down to that idea of equality and living equality and being equality. And eventually, I guess, my mother originally helped me along the way by giving me some feminist critical books. But when I was 20, I started to hang around men's rights forums. And I realized more and more the problems that men face and the difficulties that men face. And I said to myself, once again, now, if women were facing these difficulties, what would society expect of a man? And that's what I did. And that's where I am. And we really got to move on because we're totally running out of time. Even if we do go over, I don't want to go over too long. So let's move on to Hannah. Are you ready to do Jess K's? Oh, actually, wait, before we do that, and it's me doing this now, it's usually Hannah saying, no, we need to do something else before we do that. Alex,
But
did
wait,
you have some
there's
questions?
more.
Yes, but wait, there's more. Alex, you've been patiently waiting to ask questions.
No, it hasn't needed to be patient. I mean, this is it's amazing to hear all these stories. So I had a couple questions. Have any of you had any personal experience or feelings? Have any of you ever participated in some of the abuses that you argue against? Some of the domestic violence issues, the hatred of men. Did anyone kind of have those feelings and then turn from them?
Yeah, no. I guess, I've definitely hit people and been hit, just in the course of my life from my childhood onward, but, never any kind of abuse or anything like that, and never hitting and expecting to never be hit back. In fact, when I was 10, I cold-cocked a guy who was bullying a friend of mine, and he proceeded to, I don't know, he probably pounded me about 8-9 times till I hit the ground. And when I went home and my mom took one look at me and she said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "Well, I hit Ronnie because he was picking on Carl." And she said, "Well, what did you think was going to happen when you hit a bully, right? Like, of course that's going to happen." And she basically said, "Unless he starts singling you out for abuse, I'm not even going to talk to his parents, because basically, you hit him first, right?" So, I mean, I basically learned my sense of fairness at my parents' knee. And it was one that did not allow for being a damsel in distress. It never did. It looked at whining as probably the most it ain't going to get you anywhere in my family, whining. So that's really what it was. It was just fairness. Here's how things work. Life isn't always fair. Here's cause and effect, right? You want to avoid getting beaten up. Don't go cold cocking a bully because you don't like the way he's treating your friend, right? And I would like to add also that the bully wasn't actually physically assaulting my friend. I was just mad. So, yeah, there you go.
I can answer that question. I would say yes. We're having a bit of an echo here. Okay, it's settled down. Maybe it's me, actually. I do actually struggle with some of this. Not so much anymore. Now that I've actually worked a lot on this issue. But I do struggle with a lot of the definitely when I was in my teens, but maybe it's just a teenage hating everyone. I did express a lot of hatred, not to men, But just to myself, I had a lot of hatred towards men. And it took time to unwind that and understand it and realize that the reason why I had that hatred was because I had these ridiculous expectations of what men could actually do to help me in my life. And the reality is the only person who could do the things that I wanted was me. And so, and I have struggled with some of these issues. And like I said, I don't struggle with them as much anymore. These are thought patterns and belief systems, exteriorizing your agency, thinking that men have to save you, being angry and hateful towards men if your life doesn't turn out the way you want to, because obviously they're to blame, of course. These are things that can be worked through, and they should be worked through. Otherwise, you're going to be a miserable person. And for me, that's behind me in a lot. It is behind me. Like that thought pattern is way behind me. It's way in my past, and but I did go through it. And I'm going to cede the floor to Rachel.
Sorry, I thought I had it. Anyway, actually, I think from about age 13 up until probably early 20s, I still had, I think, a profound dislike of men, or maybe it was more of a specific female favoritism, just by default. I had a lot of really messed up ideas about what men were like, because my mother had always told me that you should never, ever let your guard down, and that they only want one thing, and she was telling me this from about age 6. And and I think my first explanation of sex to me was actually explained as what rape was. And that's probably like the worst way that sex should ever be explained to a 6-year-old. But so I grew up petrified of the prospect of sex, and when I became a Wiccan at about 14, I wouldn't even worship the god. Only the goddess, because I disliked guys, and I hated them because they didn't like me. It was just such anger. I don't think that I ever openly lashed out at a guy or anything like that, but it was just a lot of those internal feelings. Until I ended up having to watch almost nothing but Lifetime channel up in the mental hospital. That was all we were allowed to watch. That and the news. And that will turn you off of feminism pretty quick. Or man hatred. Because you're like, geez, I don't want anything happening to him. Oh my gosh, don't hurt him. It was ridiculous. But I think I had a couple of double standards in relationships and mistakes that I made. But other than that, nothing too terribly. I don't think I ever yelled at a guy or hit him. But no, but other than that, it was just mostly the hatred and the sort of sense of detachment from empathy for them.
I did go through that. I did go through a period when I was a stripper where I went through this intense rage towards men. I was pretty much a shit show, actually, for quite a bit. I did, there was times where I was verbally abusive, and there was one boyfriend who I had, or one lover, whatever, who was like, okay, you even try that shit with me and it's over. And I was like, oh, I had to kind of revisit myself and see what the hell I was doing. Let's see what else. There was one guy that I did when I was in my shit show stripper raging. I did smack one guy. I do remember that, and I feel awful about it. I think I pissed off one guy, and he threw me off a chair. I didn't really, I never really, oh God, I got thrown off a chair. But I didn't really take it as like, oh my God, he threw me off a chair. I pissed him off. I probably, whatever came out of my mouth was really just outrageous. I don't even know at this point. But I never had this thought that I shouldn't get hit. Like, I always grew up with, if you ever hit anybody, and if you ever hit a guy, he has every right to hit you back. So I never had this idea that no guy should ever hit me. I don't know where that concept comes from. These women who think that they're not going to hit back, get hit back if they try that. I never had that idea. But I had to do a lot of work with my rage. I started when I was 18. I've always had this really, really intense rage, which actually right now I'm extremely mellow considering who I used to be. So it's very interesting when people are like, you're so, I'm like, yeah, I've had to do years and years and years of work. When I started doing the emotional clearing work, that helped me a lot to recognize how I projected, how intense my victim mentality was, and how intense, because I felt such an intense victim, that's why I felt justified to be violent, whether it was, emotionally or whatever, towards anybody, not just anybody around me, male, female, it didn't matter. I was just very, on verge. So I had to work through a lot of my shit. And I actually had to work through a lot of my father's stuff too, that came up for me when I was doing the emotional clearing work. I'm really happy where I am now. I look back and I'm not proud of, who I was. But I've done the work to move through it. And I consciously, a few years back, I saw myself saying things when I would get pissed off. Oh, men. And I noticed that. And I was like, I don't want that even to be in my thought process ever. So it doesn't come up for me like, oh, I hate men or I'm pissed at them or whatever. I made a conscious, effort to work through that to the point where that's not even in my thought process anymore. I'm like, okay, I'm pissed. Why am I pissed? What's present? What did I do? What's going on? And as my level of self-responsibility rose, so did my level of happiness. So I found a correlation between the two, and the way I co-created relationships with men. So yeah, I definitely had to do a lot of work, and I actually try and help women kind of figure that out with my Facebook page, The Return of Femininity. I'm doing 100 days on how to treat men right. So to try and teach women how to coexist and relate healthily with men. So I don't think we have that discussion with women in our society. So sorry, lots of stuff, but yeah.
It's really strange because when I started researching and writing this piece, I wrote this to Janet Bloomfield. When I started researching and writing this piece and telling my boyfriend that I might go to Detroit, he was going, oh no, what if you get attacked? What if you get raped? I was like, it's not really like that, because there's a lot of misconceptions. So, but I said one thing that's interesting and why this is a worthwhile piece to do is because it has me thinking. And when it has something sticking in my mind, it's I'm not saying, oh, I'm so great, it's worthwhile, but, I saw a lot of layers there. And I said, we've never talked about the fact that a year and a half ago, I pushed you. Well, it was an emotional time. It was a strange time. We'd had a lot of family crises in both of our families, and I pushed him. And we were in an argument, an emotional argument. I pushed him. And I said, look, it's just never been brought up. We've never talked about it. And we started to talk about it. And it was really, really interesting how, how that happened. Just because, there's a lot of viewpoints that, again, I'm just trying to stay objective on, but it was very interesting that all the research and everything just kind of got me to think about how that was permissible, in a sense, societally. Does anyone else want to answer this question, or should I ask another one?
Go ahead, Hannah.
Oh, sorry, I was muted.
What's the question?
I think that it's the original question there, Karen. Go ahead, Hannah.
Okay. I lost track of the original question and everybody talking.
Yeah. Okay, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but the original question was, do we struggle with the same problems that we talk about?
Okay.
Yes, that was the original question. Or did you ever, did you ever participate in domestic violence towards men, or struggle with that kind of stuff? Is there a guilt element to the backlash towards it now, or is it something that you as women used to experience and don't now, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes and no. And there's I'll try to shorten this as much as I can because there's a really long story in this. The short version is, I was on drugs for years, just not the illegal kind. During my childhood, I had a life-threatening level of asthma, and they put me on a regimen of medications that included more than one steroid. I had antihistamines, I had decongestants. They just threw pills at me like candy. And I was all right for years with that, but in my adolescence, the combination of all of that impacted very badly on my psyche, I guess. And so I lost control of. I already had a violent temper, and even when I was a little girl, I had a very violent temper. Not as in I would act out violently against people, but as in I could be very verbally abusive to people. Hitting has never really been my first response to being angry. And I think it was partly because I was raised in a very traditionalist environment. And I was told, boys cannot hit you because you're a girl. They're not allowed to hit you because you're a girl. And therefore, if you hit them, you're hitting somebody who's not allowed to fight back. That's like kicking somebody who's in a wheelchair, so don't do it. So if I was mad at somebody, I was really good at finding the thing that was going to have the biggest, meanest, most painful and degrading impact on their ego and their self-esteem, and attacking it. And it's probably the thing that I hate the most. Everybody has something they hate about themselves. That's mine. That I can do that. I hate that I can do that. I wish I couldn't do that. Because if at any point, you lose control of yourself, you don't want there to be something that you can do that is incredibly damaging and hurtful to other people. If you want to have something that you can do that's incredible, you want it to be something incredibly good. And there is no good in that. And it took me recovering or going into remission. I don't know what you would call it with asthma. It's a disorder that can fluctuate throughout your life. And after I got through adolescence, I ended up needing less and less medication for it. During my adolescence, the medication affected me so badly that I had a diagnosis, and so they gave me more pills. And we figured out that the diagnosis was incorrect, that it was the medication that I had been on and no longer was taking when the happy pills started making me sick. But once the chemicals in my system started straightening out, and I was able to start to get a handle on the temper, and I've been able to refrain from being a verbally abusive person. For the most part, I'm probably, when I get really impatient, you'll know when I get really impatient in a debate with a feminist, because the digs will start coming out. And I'm not going to say I can't help it, because you have control over yourself as a person. And I do have control over myself as a person. But there are times when it's just the only thing left to say. To come out and just lambaste someone, where they come out and say something that is so stupid and so hateful and so dehumanizing towards men, or towards men's rights activists, or towards me personally, over ideology, that it's like that situation where you're in a fist fight with somebody and you realize you're not going to walk away from it until you show them that if they continue to hit you, you're going to hurt them more than they hurt you. I do that with words, and I think that's sometimes meaner than fists. But if it can make them think, about their position, then it's worth doing.
You know, one of the most amazing things that I've found is, like, because I work in the restaurant industry, and the restaurant industry, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Waiting with Ryan Reynolds, but there's this one server in that movie who she will literally be like wonderfully, cloyingly saccharine sweet to the customers, and as she's walking back into the kitchen, just like the level of salty profanity just like starts to spew forth, right?
Yeah.
You know, anytime the customers can't hear her, she's like, "Oh, motherfucker, I fucking hate this fucking bullshit fucking." Okay, that's how I am normally, right? Like, literally.
Oh my gosh.
There's a running joke at work. I'm a server. There's a running joke at work among the hostesses that, you know, my manager once, he said, anybody who comes up to the hostess desk and demands to know why somebody else was seated rather than them, they will get a skip. They will lose a turn, right? And I was like, oh my God, cool. Why were they seated instead of me? And he's like, you don't count, right? Because I'm always, you know, work just cramps my style. As like, I'm totally open about that, right? This whole working for a living thing cramps my style, right? So when the hostess seats me, I will often look at her and I'll go, you fucking whore, right? Like, why would you seat me? Why would you do that, right? And they never take it personally because they know that's who I am. And who I am is somebody who can take a hit, right? And they know, so they know. It's like, I've actually had people at work, even given the way I talk to people at work, right? I'll fucking punch you in the penis, motherfucker, right? You know, muttering under my breath, right? They have actually said to me, people at work have actually said to me, I don't think I've ever seen you angry. Right?
Like,
Karen smash.
You put me in a retail setting, and I call it the duck's back, you know, where
of every fucking day, but it's because that's my persona, and they know they can give it back, and the customers know they can give it back. I have actually told the customers, they'll be like, "Oh, could you get me a glass of water? No hurry, just whenever you come back." And I'm like, "Oh, how cute! You think I'm coming back, right?" You know, like it's just it's you know, I have an attitude, and I've never been afraid of physical violence ever, ever, ever. Right? I have engaged in physical violence. Never abuse, but physical violence in the sense of, you know, you're in a fight that was a mutual fight, right? A mutual physical altercation, right? And I've never been afraid of it. And I think that maybe, like, I've never been scared of men. I have never, like, most of my friends, the whole time I was growing up, were boys, right? And we wrestled and we tussled and we roughhoused, and, you know, and like I've just never been afraid of that. And because I'm not afraid of that, when I actually go around threatening to punch people in the penis or the boob, granted, I threatened to punch my boss in the boob once, maybe several times. You know, that like they don't take it seriously. They don't see it like it's just talk. It's just talk. And the same thing with my kids, right? I constantly, like, I will beat the shit out of you. And like, when was the last time I laid a hand on any of them? Like, years ago, right? Years and years ago. So, like, it just, I think that the people who have the greatest propensity to really instill fear in other people, or to make other people feel like they're being abused or feeling like they're just being, are the ones who will be the first to crumble into tears and the fetal position the moment somebody slaps them, right? Like, literally, there is an air in, you know, in a lot of, I guess, women, or, you know, Joffrey Baratheons, in Game of Thrones, right? That I can enact whatever violence I want on you, but I am terrified of violence coming back at me, right? I feel immune to it, and therefore it scares me. And I think that I think that the whole idea that getting hit is going to completely destroy you. Getting hit one time, getting hit one time every 6 months by, because you picked a fight, right? Like I really have a hard time seeing that as something that should be like horribly traumatizing. Women are made of glass, neither are men.
Just from my own life, like I did wrestling for however many years, almost a decade, and I periodically would have a black eye, almost never from being punched in the face, always usually it's from someone kneeing me in the face. And, I didn't...
Yeah.
Sorry?
Or are you hitting the mat?
No, I never... Well, the thing is that I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so you never really hit your head hard enough to actually raise that kind of a welt. But, I mean, at the very least, it taught me that I'm not that fragile. Not that I ever felt that fragile, because I always actually, rolled up my sleeves and got down to work. But it is a disservice that women are taught that they're that fragile, because we're really not. And on the current converse of that is that we are capable of engaging in barehanded lethal violence. I remember a article in which a woman killed a man, and she was untrained, with one punch. She wasn't that big. He didn't fight back, which would, if he had been fighting, he might have not died, but she killed him with just one punch. Once you start throwing punches, you are engaging in something that's a potentially lethal activity. Once you start engaging in physical violence as a potentially lethal activity, it should be treated as such. But we should probably move on to announce our fundraiser and talk a bit about that. Sorry to cut you off there, Karen, but we're running right out of time. And sorry, no more questions now, Alex, because we're in the home stretch of the evening.
Less about Turkish oil wrestling.
No worries.
Yeah, no, Turkish oil wrestling. Yeah, we always accept questions on Turkish oil wrestling. That's always acceptable.
Whose pants now?
Sorry?
Whose pants now?
Whose hands? What?
Pants? Whose pants? I remember something about pants.
Yeah, you have to shove your arm down the person's pants to get a grab on the pants because you're all oily to actually win at Turkish oil wrestling.
Yeah,
I will keep that in mind.
It's got some, if anybody out there who's interested, definitely look up Turkish oil wrestling. They certainly have some interesting moves to win. Okay, so we are actually right now engaged in a fundraiser campaign. As you may be aware, the hotel hosting the Men's Issues Conference in Detroit. I apologize if you guys hear squeaking sounds. It's my cat attempting furiously to get in, but I can't do anything about it right now, so I'll just continue to talk about this. As you may be aware, the hotel hosting the Men's Issues Conference in Detroit has received alleged threats against its staff and guests. This resulted in a Voice for Men, the organizers of the conference, asking for donations to cover increased security costs requested by the hotel. Although security costs may still increase, AVFM managed to fundraise the $25,000 it required within a day. Now here's our plan, the Honey Badger plan. We're going to set up a table in the hotel lobby directly across from the elevators and stairs. This table will be the first thing seen by anyone entering the lobby to attend or protest the conference. We will be the first thing people see and the first people to see anything because of where we're situated. The intent is to challenge the mainstream media's narrative about who men's rights activists are. In addition, having a highly visible group of women at the conference should serve to dissuade anyone who attends with the intent to engage in violence. Here's one of the threats we've received, documented by Crystal Garcia. Quote, "No, you clearly hate women. You're a fucking violent terrorist, and I will be armed and prepared when your trash infiltrates the city. You do not belong here." End quote. Originally, myself, Hannah, and Karen were going to attend the conference, with myself manning the table alone. However, since threats have been made against innocent members of the Detroit community, the hotel staff and guests, and also other men's rights activists, things have changed. 3 more members of Honey Badger Radio have stepped up to volunteer to help ensure a peaceful assembly at the conference. Crystal Garcia, Rachel Edwards, and Jess Kay. But we need to get them there. Because of that, we're asking you to donate so we can get the Honey Badger team at the conference and set up our table. We've calculated that we'll need $5,000 for travel, incentive expenses, contingency fee, and fundraiser costs. If all goes well, having a table full of women watching the entrance and being the first thing people see once they enter the conference should help prevent any violence from breaking out. But if it doesn't, we fully intend to serve as nonviolent human shields between any violent protesters and the conference attendees, hotel staff, and guests. If they want to silence men's issues with violence, they can damn well go through us. So, essentially, if you want to see us get there and fulfill our mission, please consider going and donating. The fundraiser website is at oh goodness, now I've forgotten the
Fund anything.
fundanything.com/en. Was it en?
En. Campaign. /campaign. Honey hyphen badger hyphen bring it campaign hyphens in between all the words. You can find the actual link on the ad that I put on the fundraising video that I put on my channel just today. And just to let everybody know that the 3 Honey Badger mystery bags of mystery, have already been claimed. We may actually have to, we thought it would be a limited time offer till the 11th or something like that. And
Actually give us some time to maybe construct a box of mystery.
Yeah, we might actually do something even more. It all depends, but we definitely we're on our way. There are still a whole bunch of really cool prizes, and the really neat thing about this is that if you donate, say $25, you don't just get the $25 gift. You get the $10 gift and the $5 gift as well. So, I mean, like, you basically get everything on down, no matter how much you donate. So, yeah, it's definitely, we're definitely not, we're definitely trying to make it worth your while. And
it will at least give you a thanks that you'll enjoy.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, like, the Honey Badger Bring It t-shirt, which I basically suggested based on a comment on one of our videos. I
think it was my video, the one where I'm actually sobbing.
Yeah, and somebody said, oh, the only thing left to do is to hand out white t-shirts and red pens so we can all draw targets on our chests, right? And I was like, oh my god, what a great idea! And then Allison and Rachel and I think Allison's husband all collaborated in designing that, and now it's a thing.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very sexy design, and it could be yours. If we get closer to the actual amount that we need, I probably will put up another type of reward. It will just be the t-shirt. So it won't be any other reward but the t-shirt, and it'll probably be for like $50, $60. But we'll have to get closer or to the amount before we can do something like that, because the reason why they're priced the way they are is because this is a fundraiser. It isn't just buying t-shirts or bookmarks or postcards or anything. It's intended to, at the end of the day, have additional funds to do something more. So yeah. So but look out for that if you really, really want a t-shirt and you don't want the other stuff, we'll be flexible about that. But please do donate. Do donate if you want to see us go. And we are definitely like it's amazing that Crystal and Rachel and Jess Kay. Jess Kay is the woman who does a lot of our reviews. By the way, we read them out during the shows, but she can't actually come to the shows because she works at this time. But it's great. It's amazing to see them actually step up and volunteer in a situation that is actually potentially dangerous. And although I know for a fact that women being there will reduce the potential for violence, there is still the possibility. So it is good to see that, and I really appreciate them doing that. And again, if you do want to donate to help us out, it's fundanything.com/en/campaigns/honey-badger-bring-it-campaign. And we really appreciate anything that you can do to help. And I think this is it. Unless anybody has some final words on why they became a badger.
I just wanted to thank you guys for having me on the show. This is Alex, and thank you for being so candid with me and including me so readily.
Oh, you're welcome.
Oh no, we're always welcoming to anybody who's interested. Like even if you were a feminist, we would definitely have you on.
Well, I think Alex does identify as a feminist.
Even
It's okay.
I'm not actually sure. I mean, I identify as a feminist, but my story is kind of long, and but I definitely identify as an equality. I like equality. Equality is good. People shouldn't hurt people. I do feel that human beings are inherently kind of bad, but that's a different topic for another time, I guess.
Well, what I mean is, even if you were like one of our philosophical opponents who was like solidly entrenched in just, I've been having a conversation by email with one of them just this evening, that they're just so entrenched in their worldview that there's absolutely no room for discussion whatsoever. Even if you were one of those, we would be happy to have you on.
Well, that makes me feel a little less special, but thank you just the same.
It's special because we've actually really enjoyed having you on.
Yeah, you've brought up a lot of stuff that I've had to think about, so that's always a good thing. I like to get the gray matter. I get warmed up with something to think about. But I want to thank you, Alex, for coming on. Thank you for taking an interest in us as well, and potentially writing a piece. I'm not going to announce anything until you tell me it's okay to, but taking an interest in reporting on us. And I want to thank my co-hosts, Hannah Wallen, Crystal Garcia, Karen Strawn, Rachel Edwards, and also Janet Bloomfield, who had to bow out because she usually can't stay up very long. She's got young kids. And I also want to thank everybody behind the scenes who makes this possible, who always doing work with us. Yule, who does our artwork. Mike, who's doing some really great animation work. Europa, who also does artwork. Phil, who does our animations, not every week, but quite a few of them. And Sage, who's been helping us out with our website. Thank you, Sage. We really appreciate the work. And everybody else who's behind the scenes helping us out. James doing our producing. And, well, even my husband has chipped in with a potential new app for the radio show. So thank you to everybody who makes this show possible, especially our audience as well, and everybody who's donating, who donates to us, and who's considering donating to the fundraiser. You guys are why we do this, and I really want to see our message get a wider play, get out there, because I believe it's a really good message, even if people think that it isn't or misconstrue it. But I truly believe in equality, and the kind of equality that has men and women have each other's backs. And I want to see a world in which that's realized. So with that, thank you and good night. Same Badger times, same Badger channel.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio, radio with